Good afternoon. My name is Meg Dillon. I'm the Executive Director for Advising and Academic Resources here at the University of Lynchburg. And today we have a very special guest, Danielle Sarchet, who is here to talk with us a little bit more about international students, how we can support them, and especially through advising and some of those tools that we need to really holistically help these students. So Danielle, thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to let you introduce yourself and then we will get going.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Meg. I appreciate it very much. It's an honor to be able to share a little bit of some of the experiences that I have, some of the things that I'm learning. To give you a little bit of an overview of my experience, I've been working in international companies and other educational institutes for about probably 10 plus years. I love working with international students, but I will attest that I am not an expert in any particular country. But I want to share with you from my heart and some of the things that I have learned along the way. So we can go ahead and jump in and get started. So international students. All right, we are going to play a little bit of a game. So I want each of you who are listening to this, this really helps put things into perspective, especially if we've been living here in the States for a while. We might be comfortable in where we're at. We've learned systems, we've been raised in systems. So I want you to imagine right now, and Meg is here with me too, so she's going to do the same thing, where let's imagine you are going to be either studying abroad or you're going to move to another country. And that is everybody. So even if you are 18 or if you are 99. So just imagine right now, if you are going to move, if you have a family, what are some of the things that you need to know? So what are the concerns you may have, and what are the things that you logistically would have to do to move out of the country? So I'm going to have Meg, we're going to popcorn around a little bit and kind of see.
It. And I think this is so important too, because it really does help put things in perspective when we are thinking about international students coming even here to the University of Lynchburg. Okay, Danielle, so what concerns would I have if I had to pick up today and move to Thailand? Well, one, I think logistically just moving all of my stuff overseas, how that would work. I have a baby, so, making sure I have a home in Thailand and childcare.
Yes.
And what else? Technology, cell phone, I having to learn all of that. What else?
Right. Moving, like if you have to rent or if you're going to buy a home.
Yeah. How to store money, how to be able to pay bills here in the U.S.
That's right. Yes, visas, all of the different things that kind of come along. The plane tickets, where you're going to land, how are you going to get transportation from where you land to where you're going to go? Are the signs in English? Do you need a translator on your phone? Do you need to bring a dictionary? Like there's so many different things.
Yeah.
Same thing with me is like when I moved, I had to think, what about my son? How is the health care over there? How many clinics do they have? How many hospitals? Will he be able to have childcare? How much does that cost? Will his childcare provider speak English? Or can they do a dual where they can teach him too, like different things? There's so much to think about. And so putting that into perspective is what our students have to think about before coming. And there's a million things. The educational system. How is the educational system different from the United States? What about conversion rates? And then just so many different things. So
and honestly, leaving your community and your friends and support system and just general communication, that would be really difficult.
Exactly. And thinking of the homesickness and missing your family, all of those things, the culture shock that goes into it. There is a lot. So things will be missed because if it's your first time living in another country, there will be things that you don't think of. Are the refrigerators the same size? Do I have a washer and dryer? Things that we take for granted and we know we have here, or vice versa. It can be difficult. All right. So lots of things to figure out. We talked about way more than this, but ticketing, room reservation, transportation, meals, maps of the campus. The administration piece is huge. Everything from paying your bills to just learning how to work with people. It's just a lot. So international students at University of Lynchburg. Let's talk about this a little bit. You can go into the next one. Perfect. Let's explore the world. So we currently have 135 international students. This is not all undergrad. These are also students who are on OPT as well. We will be having over 50 international students in spring 2024 that have their visas. They're ready to come. So our population is growing. It's fantastic. This is also representing 34 different countries.
Can you tell us what OPT stands for?
Yes, absolutely. So OPT is optional practical training. This is what international students can opt into with the government to allow them to work in the United States for a year right after they graduate. They can work for a year unless their degree is STEM eligible, and they can work 3 years. A lot of students like to do this, and as University of Lynchburg, we hold their record still, and we still stay in communication with those students.
Awesome.
Great question. So we have representing 34 different countries that will grow. I love that number because it just shows me that so many people that we can learn from and grow, and just the beauty that it brings to the campus. They have chose to study in the U.S. for cultural experience in addition to the academics and preparing for their future jobs. Most will speak at least two languages. Some of their native languages are in English, but most will speak 2 languages fluently. This is what I'm going to spend a little bit of time on. This is what's called the cultural iceberg. So a cultural iceberg is at the top of an iceberg. There's usually more ice that you see visibly, and we don't see what is below the iceberg. So what we see above the iceberg, if we are on a cruise ship in Alaska looking at all the icebergs, we are going to see things like language, accents, different music, different food, clothing, traditions. Those are things that we can see, hear. For the food, you can taste it. Below the iceberg is all the things that we don't see right away that are underlying, but what we can be aware of and be able to learn. Just the differences of around the world. That something that is different from us and what we've been raised in is learning from others and how their belief systems work, their morals, their reasons behind their traditions. The things that I have noticed over the years, and I still have to continue to learn and continue to ask questions with, and I really do with a lot of my students and friends that I have in different countries. I like to ask them questions as they ask me questions about, so how does this work in your country? What are some of these beliefs? What are these cultural things that are in your country that we can learn from? So one of the things that I always notice with a lot of students and a lot of different parts of the world is a negotiating culture. So a lot of times you may get one answer, but maybe in your country, if you push hard enough, you'll be able to get a couple different answers. Negotiating for everything from the prices of things to anything. I mean, it could just really be anything. So that's something that has helped me a lot to realize that for sometimes as Americans or other people, we might think that's rude or they're being deceitful. No, I really think it could possibly be, this is a cultural thing. This is what they're used to doing. So having that frank conversation and letting them know, or anybody know, actually this is a non-negotiable issue. Like, this is a topic. I like to use the example when students want me to call the government to have them choose something else or have the government make an exception for them. I'm like, this is something that is non-negotiable. We're not going to be able to negotiate this. We can talk about it because I know it can be frustrating, but at the same time, this is something that's non-negotiable. So negotiating.
And I think one thing too, Danielle, that I've noticed, especially with some of our international students who do try to negotiate, usually they're doing it from a place of, it's not necessarily something that's a negative or a bad. And I think in our culture, sometimes we can perceive things as being rude or maybe even a little aggressive. But really, for example, I have one student that came here and he had an idea of courses he wanted to take, and he negotiated with me constantly. We sat down, we talked about it numerous times, and he was trying to negotiate. And then once I was able to finally kind of explore different avenues of explaining why he could not do what he wanted to do, it finally clicked for him. And he realized that that was something that, again, he could not negotiate. And taking the time to explain the reasons why.
Yes.
Because sometimes they really don't understand, like Danielle was talking about, their educational system may be different than ours. And so especially in those cases when it comes to advising and things like that, if students are trying to negotiate with you, being very direct and clear. You can be kind and considerate, but also saying, this is a non-negotiable. There's a prerequisite for this course, so you cannot take it at this time when you want. But here's some other courses that might interest you. So it's kind of redirecting that well-intended energy, I think, on their side to then redirect that into a positive path of being a leader on campus and things like that. So I think it's good to note that.
Perfectly said. That is perfectly said. Yes, I can't say it any better. And I feel like it's very helpful, probably even main part of the presentation, I would say, is to think on those things. And so that's good to keep in mind. So if you have somebody who might be negotiating or asking you for something that you haven't been asked before, think about that. That might be something like that they're used to, and it kind of for me, it puts a light bulb on. I'm like, okay, this is different. Morals too, it can go to the same way that in some countries, like a piece of paper means a piece of paper. So if they've signed an agreement, it doesn't necessarily mean that they could be upheld to that agreement. So just talking that through, I think is important. And a lot of conversations I have in my office to be like, no, this does mean, like, if you miss this deadline, you will get charged with this. And we walk that through. Employment, we see that a lot. Like, that's very good for them to be able to know, and the directness is really important, and they will appreciate that. They will appreciate a direct response. That way they can learn and be able to adapt. So it's all a journey.
That's great. So, Danielle, can you talk a little bit about, on that same vein, so we have some students, who may be confused in terms of plagiarism or things like that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So the plagiarism concept might not be a concept depending on the country. Like, it really could be, and I've worked with 5 or 6 different countries in particular that they didn't have plagiarism as a concept. So again, having that directness and breaking down with students, okay, when they get a referral or cautionary, I don't know how it works as much with the paper aspect, but to be heightened aware of that and what that is. Also with writing papers, I've had so many students in the past that have told me, master's students mostly, had their papers written in their undergrad. They would hire somebody to write their papers. And then to us, it's very maybe shocking to hear something like that, but for them, that is normal. So that is a shock when they come here to be able to learn different things, and they have to adapt very quickly. So that resilience that they build up after that semester or two just shows the strength a lot to be able to go from one system that might be completely different than another. In some countries, grades are negotiable. You can go to the professor and negotiate, A to B, C. So that might be something that can be seen.
Yeah, and I think the AARC and Danielle's department really partner to try to get this information out to our international students as soon as possible, and in many different ways. So we definitely work together at their orientation to go over some of these issues. They're getting a lot of information and that culture shock and all these different things all at once. So if you do have a student who may be plagiarizing or may be, cheating in a certain way that we would find it cheating, that is a great learning opportunity for them. And honestly for us, because taking the time to really explain the why is so critically important to supporting these students, especially with advising and plagiarism and things like that that can be honor code violations. They still need to be upheld. There is no excuse, for them plagiarizing or for them cheating.
Yes.
However, it really can be a good teachable moment. So even if they don't get a great grade on an assignment for plagiarism, they will learn from that. And if you have that extra time to have that conversation and explain it and sit down with them and help them understand for their next assignment why this wasn't correct, that really will go such a long way in that whole education system.
Absolutely, absolutely. And even the honor code, like the terminology honor code, that in itself is probably hard to understand because honor code might look different in different places too. So perfectly said. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you. Okay, other cultural challenges for international students. Greetings. So there's different greetings from all different parts of the world. One of the common threads that I hear often, almost every semester, and this is why I put it in this presentation as well as in orientations for international students, is greetings are short here. They're very short. I even remember going to a presentation and they had this like little meet and greet. I guess I was used to only like 1 or 5 minutes, but theirs was like 20 minutes. I was like, this is a long time. Also, and this is good for us to know to kind of slow down maybe a little bit, when you're passing somebody, what international students have said to me throughout the years is they never got used to people who would say, hi, how are you, but kept walking. It's more of a smile, how are you, and they keep walking, and they would get a little bit offended just because they're like, I actually really do want to talk about how I'm doing. And so that was a little bit hard. So we do this little skit in orientation when one person walks by another one, and that helps out a lot. But just little things like that. Greetings can be hard. Food is always going to be difficult for international students. Everything that's made most commonly in the States, it will have different preservatives. It'll have more sugar added to it than other items that they might be used to. And if you can imagine, if you're not used to the food, like how that can affect you in a very holistic way. Like if your stomach is upset those first 2 or 3 weeks because you are not adjusting well to the food, that's going to affect your sleep. That's going to affect your focus. It's going to be hard. So a food adjustment is always what I've heard over the years visiting friends and like it's just hard to get used to. Transportation. Anywhere you go around the world, transportation is one of the key things to learn to be able to get around in different cities. So learning what the bus systems are here. Uber, a lot of countries will have their own versions of Uber, but they're going to be substantially cheaper than the ones that are here. So transportation, getting around different places, knowing landmarks, that's a hard thing. If there are students who are over a certain age and they live off campus and they're first coming here, buying a house, but then I'm not buying a house, renting a location, but then realizing, there's not a bus stop right in front of my house. Most countries will have a very robust transportation system where there's a lot more buses. The buses come quicker. They'll have mopeds that they could hop on in the back. So I think out here, particularly with the transportation system, because there's not as many people that use it, it takes longer to get to places and it is more expensive than what they're used to. Stereotypes. This is something that is very hard when they might first come here to be able to work with. And as much as we don't want it to happen, it will happen. If it doesn't happen here, it's going to happen out in the community. So being able to have people to talk to through with some of these things, I think, is really important. And also being aware of the things that we say, and being able to be sensitive to where students might be coming from or what their religious background is or their cultural traditions, things like that. So just always keeping aware, I think, is really important. Cultural challenges for international students, family problems. This is something that I saw a lot of during COVID that was just absolutely heartbreaking. It is so expensive to buy plane tickets. It's not like our students can just drive up the road or even drive 5 or 6 hours to be able to visit family in another state. So if you can imagine, like, if there's something that happened in your home country, and during COVID, I had a lot of students that had deaths in the family and their country was closed down. They were not able to go back for funerals. Just keeping that in mind and being in good communication with your students and building relationships up with them that they can share.
And I think one thing too that's really important is a lot of times you as faculty are some of the key people that these students interact with on a day-to-day basis. And so if you're having an advising appointment and you're talking with students and you sense that, they're struggling, maybe it is socially, maybe it is they're homesick, we have so many great resources on our campus to help support that, and so Danielle Sarchet is a great person to go to if you have questions about that. But we also have our Spiritual Life Center and our case management on campus and our counseling center. The AARC is here to help them from an academic standpoint. So understanding and knowing the resources that are available, not for just international students, but for all, is going to make such a deep impact.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. The collectivism versus the individualism as well. Now, this is different everywhere. So there's different levels of collectivism too, and different levels of individualism. But most places around the world, there's very much a collective mindset, and the United States is very individualistic. We're very, very individualistic. So that can be an adjustment as well. If you're used to being able to have people who come next to you who are just like the family. I've had students who came over with dependents, and there would be one mother with 4 kids, and a lot of times, I've seen it in 3 different cases, they just assumed that there would be free childcare or there would be people around enough that would be able to be able to take care of each other's kids. And that was very hard to get used to, and they had to work hard to have network and connect to make sure that they had that. So just different things, and like sometimes you don't think about it when you travel.
Yeah.
So it's just good to keep in mind.
That's so true. And I think this is just great examples of bringing more awareness to what our international students are actually going through, not only just to get here, but then to sustain and be, surrounded here. So I think these are great tools.
Yes. Thank you so much. Cultural challenges for international students. Depending on where they come. Now, I keep thinking about this for the community too, just lack of cultural sensitivity, just trying to understand and learn the students' culture and be able to ask questions. But they are going to face different things if they go to Walmart and they meet different people, like that. It's just going to be something that they come across. So these are challenges that they do have to face. Communicating in another language that is not their first language. That is amazing, but it is very difficult. You have to continue to switch back and forth as to some of the languages that you need to learn. I mean, I can't count how many times students will come in and they start speaking their own language directly at me, and they go, "Oh, I'm sorry," and then they'll switch. And I love that. It's a beautiful thing, but it is they have to switch back and forth, and this is just another thing that they have to remember, going back and forth. Educational challenges, and also an additional, just more challenges that they have to go through. Status regulations. They have to work with the government, and the government is very strict on their visas. So it ends up being very hard to be able to continue to go through and to learn all of the restrictions that they have. Being able to be full-time, what does that look like? I have to stay under a certain amount of hours to work on campus. CPT, the curricular practical training that they can get after a year, then the OPT. Like, there's just a lot that they have to do.
So what are some things that, especially for faculty advisors, that they need to know when scheduling courses?
Great question. Very good
Yeah.
question. So for scheduling courses, all international students have to maintain a full course of study to remain in the States.
And here at the University of Lynchburg, that's 12 credit hours minimum.
Undergraduate.
Full-time for
Yes.
undergraduate.
It's 12 credit undergraduate. 9 of those have to be residential. They can only have one online course that can add to that 12.
Oh, that's a great tip, because we
Yes.
do offer a lot of online courses. Would that cover both asynchronous and synchronous online courses?
Good question. So as long as there is a residential component
Okay.
of those 9, then it could. So
Okay.
that is one of those, we have lots of conversations with different departments and the different degree programs to see what that would include. So 9 of the residential has to meet the residential component, but an asynchronous or online class could be for the other 3 credit
So
course.
they have to be in at least 9 credits
Yes.
of in-person seats,
Face-to-face.
face-to-face, and then they can have additional online courses after that.
That's right. And they
That's
can
a great
have as many
question.
as they want. That's
Okay,
a really good
good.
question. So
It's something we all need to learn. I
Yes.
think that one is important.
Yes, they can have 15 credits, and 2 of those could be, online.
Okay.
Or sorry, 1. Yeah,
Yeah.
2 would be online. But as long as they have 9 residential courses. For a grad student, I don't know how many have grad classes who are going to be on this, but it would be a total of 9 credits, and 6 of those have to be residential. If it's
Okay.
a doctoral program, 6 of it need total credits, and then 3 of those need to be residential.
That's really good tip.
Yes.
Anything else that we need to know about that? So say, for example, we have a student who gets UW'd or unofficially withdrawn
Yes.
from a course. Maybe they're struggling,
Yes.
and by midterms they do get unofficially withdrawn. What should an advisor do at that point?
They immediately reach out to me.
Okay,
Because
that's great.
my whole position for the DSO, designated school official, is to help maintain their status. So what I could do, and working with Meg,
Yeah.
is being able to help get them enrolled into a class if they got withdrawn from it.
Okay.
Now, I will say that students can fail a class. We don't want them failing classes, but a lot of times it's better for them to fail the class and maintain their status so that they can remain in the States.
Okay.
Because the government will do an automatic termination if they go below full time.
Okay, so in those
tricky.
instances, especially looking at midterm grades, so for advisors, we should be checking up on our students regularly, especially midterm grades. It gives us a good idea of how they're doing in each course. And I think that's the time, if you do notice a student who is at an F at midterm, who may be international, or has a UW, the appropriate steps would be to immediately contact the student with Danielle Sarchet, and you can add my office in as well. And that way we can work with the student to either add a mid-semester start course to get them back to full-time status, or work with the faculty to see if they can remain in the course, even if they may not pass, actually.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. And then another thing on top of that is, when do they get withdrawn? Usually 21 days or so. Let me know way ahead of time, because I would love to meet with the student, now we go over this in orientation and the importance of it, but it is always good to try to catch the student before it gets too hard. But as long the government cares about them being in the class,
Okay.
physically in the class, I think that's the most important
Yeah.
thing. Now, if they do fail a whole semester, sometimes a semester or 2, the government will kind of look at that a little bit. But particularly as long as students are staying in class and they are physically in class.
Yeah, and this is a great reminder for all advisors, if you do have any student who's struggling, to put in those advising alerts, because that way someone from our office or other advisors on campus can reach out to them to offer them those tools and support resources.
Yes, absolutely. I appreciate that a whole lot. Health insurance. Health insurance is also a huge challenge for students. Most will be coming from a universal healthcare system. So a universal healthcare system, they might get a card from the government, but they can access healthcare wherever and whenever they would like. So that is very different in the States. You have out-of-network providers, you have in-network providers, you have places that won't accept insurance, and also the cost is so astronomical compared to what they're used to. So they might go, here's another thing, most places you go to the hospital for even minor things, and they have a few clinics, you know, around the different areas. So they might be used to going to the emergency room for $5 or $10. You go to the emergency room out here and you're going to get slapped with a huge bill, like thousands of dollars. So we go over that in orientation. Again, the steepest learning curve is when something actually happens and going through that. So that, again, that's something that I help out a lot with, understanding bills, fighting with insurance companies. So that's something that we do, and being able to help make sure that students plan, they're insured for one, every international student is insured, but also help when they do get bills, helping them understand those bills and what's the difference between an EOB, what's an EOB versus everything else, and kind of walk them through that process. The educational systems, like understanding, I put GPA up here, but that's just a small, like everything could be different to them. So everything from writing formats, how grades are calculated, with test deadlines, like everything could be very, very different. Interactions with professors. We talked about this before, where a lot of students, because of their educational backgrounds, it's considered rude to talk to their professors in their culture. So a lot of students would come into my office and they would be like, can you ask my teacher this? I'm like, you can talk to your teacher. And it would be like a lot. They're like, what? I can ask my teacher this? This is appropriate to do? As well as eye contact. In some cultures, having eye contact with somebody who's an authority over you is considered rude, or opposite, like you need to have intense contact, eye contact with everyone. So interacting with professors and remembering what is respectful and not is a challenge. It's a challenge.
And I think this is a great point, because if we have students, who may not be talking in class, this is another great teachable moment where you can just remind them, hey, I'm here to answer your questions. I'm here to help you with what you need in terms of the course. So I think that's a great point, Danielle. That's great.
Memorizing subject matter. This is hard in general, but memorizing subject matter can be very, very, very hard, especially if you have not had that in your middle school, high school environment. Testing formats. Testing formats will be different. Online classes. A lot of classes around the world are probably more used to residential classes, so online systems might be different. There's more of accountability for yourself to be able to complete some of them. Writing formats, plagiarism concepts, all challenges that students have to go through.
And we usually have students, if they are struggling with the writing formats or plagiarism, we really do partner with the Writing Center and Jer Bryant and his team to really provide that additional support. So that's another just great tool to remember to send them to different resources on campus.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. The cultural adaptation curve. So this is, I need to update the picture. The picture isn't very good, but it's a good reminder as to what students have to go through more when they first get here, or even 6 months after they get here. So it's culture shock, being able to go into another country and being inundated with all of these differences. And I myself, when I moved over, I read a book on culture shock. I read up on it. I tried to research it, and I was like, I'm not going to get culture shock. I hit it hard when I first moved over. Everybody has to go through it. I really do think that, and this is what we emphasize in our orientations, you will go through it. Try to be aware of that you will go through it, because that awareness helps you go through it quicker. And it looks different for everyone. If anybody has had grief training, I really am equating it to that, where a lot of times students might be grieving, they're homesick, they want to be back at home with their food, their sleep schedules, with their families, their traditions. But what I typically see is a honeymoon phase right in the beginning. I'm super excited, I'm getting free t-shirts, I'm going to all these cool games and activities. And it kind of goes for a couple weeks, and then all of a sudden it could drop off. Again, everybody is different with this. Everybody is different. It's not going to look the same for every single student. So what I try to do if I have a student who is very upset or working through different things, I try to remember this, that they might be upset because they're going through culture shock and they might be going through it quickly. And that can look different for everyone. It could look a little bit more angry. It could be depression. It could be different ways it could look, but just to be reminded that it looks different for everyone. And then when difficult things happen, to keep this in mind, that this might just be the part that is difficult. When they start to adapt more, what I see and what I've seen it when I experienced culture shock in 3 different countries I lived in, and they all were different, is when I found more humor in things, like things that I didn't, I just had to laugh at myself. I just, like, in one of the countries I was in, if you leave a little bit of space in a line, that's an open invitation to cut through, and to stand in front. And at first I was like, that's rude, I don't like that. But then I realized, after talking to some others that helped me through it, they're like, oh, just tap the person in front of you. They will immediately bow and then go behind. And I'm like, but I always would laugh at myself because I would always forget, and I wouldn't want to do that because I'm not used to that. And then I would let 5 people get in front of me.
Oh, no.
So just little things like that. And I see it with our students too, where they're yes, it's good to find, okay, I'm learning this, and that's okay. It's good that I'm learning. It's good that I'm learning.
And it's a process.
It's a process. It's a process. And then feeling at home. And again, this is different for so many. So, I mean, we could see the at-home feeling within a couple weeks if they go through this really quickly.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of great things on campus that are geared towards our international students. They've created organizations already for students of like-mindedness. They've put on the International Food Festival, which is incredible. They've done so many different things. So we, as a community here on campus, can absolutely support them in this journey. As individuals, but also as a collective, to make them feel more at home.
Exactly. And now that you said that too, I did notice this semester, I feel like the majority of students went through this really quickly, right in the beginning. Like, because they felt at home so close, and they had so many people who were interacting with them and caring for them. So I did see that difference this year, or this semester, yes. Best practices for working with international students. See each person as a unique individual. Each is their own human. They are their own human. And everybody is different. We have different things that we can learn from, but each student is different and unique. This is something that's helped me, and I know this is hard as so many people are busy, but I try to remind myself to give an extra 5 minutes to walk through a process or concept. It might just take that much. It might take a little bit more. It might not even take 5 minutes.
And this is a really good thing for inside of the classroom, because they are having to switch between languages sometimes. They are having to learn things quickly. One of the faculty who came to this in-person meeting talked about how she has had to really challenge herself to think outside of her box and to give directions, give instructions in different ways. She's recording her courses, which not only benefits our international students, but all of the students in that class, so they can go back and re-listen to the material. So that kind of idea of the universal design of, teaching is really important, not just for international students, but for all students. And I think that 5 minutes, or just making sure you explain it, and then maybe explain it in a different way, is just so helpful and impactful.
Yes, absolutely. Ask about their country. They want to talk about their country. They want to talk about differences and things that they are learning and what is different. So this is one of the things that I ask often as I'm learning too. When I'm explaining something in my office, I'm like, out of curiosity, how have you learned this? Or what has happened in your country? Realize their culture may affect how you relate and respond. This is where it's the learning curve for all of us. Cultural awareness when speaking with a parent of an international student. So coming from if you talk to one, that it might be different, and just be aware that they are from another country. And one of the things I want to emphasize the most that I have learned, and I have to keep reminding myself, is give yourself a break. Give yourself time to breathe. Give yourself, because we're learning, This helps. Like for me in particular, negotiating is hard and it's draining on me. Even when I was living over, I went to the stores that I didn't have to negotiate with because it just drains me. So I find myself even now, if I have 5, 6 students that have come up back to back and it's just been a little bit hard, I will close my door and I will give myself to breathe for a couple minutes, and then even to give yourself that brain space to think and dwell and debrief in your mind. I think that's very helpful.
Danielle, thank you so much for just taking the time to do this, to help support not only our staff and faculty here on campus, but honestly our campus community. You have been influential in the amount of time that you've been here just working with our international students. We've seen amazing changes, amazing initiatives coming from you and your office, your staff. So I'm very grateful that you were willing to come talk with us today, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. It was an honor. It was an honor. Thank you all so much. And I also would like to say, if anybody has any questions, I would love to work with professors and anybody as a department or individual. If you just want to call and then we work through a situation and we talk together, I would love to do that because we all are a team. I love the campus, so I love the collaboration.
And this is not just a one-person show. This is definitely a campus community surrounding people and caring about people. So have a wonderful day to all. Thank you again, Danielle, for being here.
Thank you, Meg.